Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Healing Outside the Box. I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach, and today I'm bringing you episode 158. I'm calling this Possible Alternative Treatments for Alzheimer's Disease. First, I need to say I came across so much darn material on this subject that I may need to split this into a few episodes. Another thing I need to say is that after going over all this stuff and what I've discovered, I am now on a mission. I am a rebel with a cause. I am the Don Quixote of possible Alzheimer's treatments. And in the next few episodes, I'm going to get off my high horse, like Don Quixote, and tell you why I'm a rebel with a cause. It occurred to me from reading through this material that not only might Alzheimer's be treatable, it might be preventable. But there's a big but, and not the Kardashian kind. Here it is. But what we have to do to get where we need to go is a lot. Not necessarily a lot of money, which I know is a sensitive topic, but a lot of attention to what's really important. And that's different for everyone. It may be important for you to be healthy into your 80s and 90s, or to play with your grandchildren, or to go trolling on the internet for a senior dating service. In that case, we're ready for change. Now, I'm not judging the trollers. I just want to be, well, factual, as Al Franken would say. In fact, he repeatedly said it in his book about Rush Limbaugh. Something about that he's a big fat liar. And yes, I suppose he will be leaving us, and perhaps he should be leaving us. So I too must move on. Let's start with a historical perspective of Alzheimer's disease, and then define some terms. By the way, the NIH has a fact sheet, and I'll give you a link to it in the show notes. Alzheimer's disease is named after, wait for it, Dr. Alzheimer. Back in 1906, Dr. Alzheimer noticed some changes in the brain tissue of a woman who had died of this unusual mental illness. Her symptoms, when she was alive that is, included memory loss, language problems, and unpredictable behavior. After she died, he examined her brain and found many abnormal clumps, we now call them amyloid plaques, and tangled bundles of fibers, which we now call tau tangles. By the way, tau proteins that become tangled up are normally found in brain tissue, but then they become abnormal and start to accumulate, slowly at first, then the tangles accumulate at a faster rate. To this day, the accumulation of these plaques and tangles are the defining feature of Alzheimer's disease. There's also a loss of proper connections between the nerve cells, or neurons as they're called. This loss of connectivity interferes with energy transmission from neuron to neuron, which will affect all types of cognitive ability. Think of a neuron as a sideways tree. There's a big round end and a long trunk-like end. The electricity travels from end to end and then jumps to the next neuron. In the final stages of Alzheimer's, this lack of transmission of neurons will affect physical ability as well as memory and other mental ability. This is because we need our brain to tell our muscles to contract, so that our legs can then move forward into a walking gait or whatever else we need our muscles for. The neurons that lose this connective ability will eventually die. That's why you see those horrendous pictures of CAT scans in the final stages of Alzheimer's. It looks like the brain has disintegrated, and in fact, it has to some extent. Damage to the brain can start as early as a decade or more before memory and other cognitive problems appear. The initial memory loss starts in a part of the brain called the hippocampus. The damage will then spread to other parts of the brain. This is why the memory is the first to go, especially short-term memory. But eventually speech and walking will be affected in essentially all cases. Now, anyone with a loved one who has Alzheimer's can tell you that once the symptoms start, the disease seems to progress faster and faster. CAT scans have shown this to be the case. As for the numbers, there are currently about 5 million cases in the U.S. alone. There are various opinions as to predictions about future cases. Although experts may argue about specific numbers, it's clear to everyone that the number of new cases is increasing. In the 60s and 70s, hardly anyone knew what the term Alzheimer's disease meant, except for the doctors, of course. Now, Alzheimer's is technically a form of dementia, and dementia was well known. But Alzheimer's is now the most common form of dementia. If we look at cases of only Alzheimer's disease, there seems to be a genetic component, but it is not that common. It's usually mentioned in relationship to an early onset type of dementia. Back in 1987, scientists discovered a gene with mutations related to this disease. One of the proteins involved in this inherited form of Alzheimer's that is damaged is called amyloid precursor protein, or APP. There are a few other genes found with mutations in this early onset genetic type of Alzheimer's, but scientists still don't know much about these genetic defects or how they got there. What we are now learning about is that lifestyle-related forms of Alzheimer's disease are much more common. You will also hear the term vascular dementia that relates to the risk factor form of Alzheimer's. The risk of Alzheimer's appears to be increased by many conditions that damage the heart and blood vessels. You may see the term atherosclerosis used in this context. Now, atherosclerosis refers only to arteries, not veins. In other words, the blood vessels where the blood flow goes away from the heart. Atherosclerosis, in general terms, means the narrowing of the opening to the arteries caused by plaque formation. Progressive atherosclerosis can cause many problems, as I'm sure we know. These include heart attacks, strokes, especially when the carotid artery on each side of the neck gets clogged, impotence, peripheral vascular disease, or PVD, and aneurysms. Apparently, we can now add Alzheimer's disease to this list. People who have diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or a past history of a stroke are at higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease later in life. What scientists are saying now is that, like cancer, there is no one single cause of Alzheimer's. It is, in large part, I believe, our crappy food supply that is creating this monster, but it can also possibly be viruses, environmental toxins, herbicides, and a lot of people are looking into that. Also, stress may be a factor, like it is with heart disease, and also level of education. That may be a use it or lose it kind of thing. People who value education may be interested in learning new things throughout their life. And it's not rocket science. It can be crossword puzzles or polka. Scientists also believe that even medications like Ambien or statins that are meant to lower cholesterol may increase our risk. So wait a minute. Does high cholesterol that helps create atherosclerosis also be creating a higher risk of Alzheimer's? And do cholesterol-lowering meds also create a higher risk of Alzheimer's? Well, yes, as it turns out. So, do we want to lower our cholesterol with drugs or not? Yikes. This is making me confused and disoriented just thinking about it. The Alzheimers.org website, or alz.org, goes into this in more detail, and I'll give you a link in the show notes. Maybe the most obvious question is this. Do we have control over any of this? Yes, we do. So let's forget about that type with the genetic connection, because there's nothing we can do since our fertilized egg days are behind us. Now, you may want to crawl into a fetal position thinking about this, and you can certainly do so as you see fit. There are also studies that indicate Latinos and African Americans have a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Again, nothing to do there. There's also more women than men who get Alzheimer's disease. I suppose you could change your gender, but let's not get too hasty. There are many risk factors that we can control or even change, because most experts believe Alzheimer's disease is a result of many complex interactions. And the same experts also believe that we will be able to solve this problem. But I'm afraid I'll have to put off listing the risk factors that we can control until next week. I have to go take a nap now because I've been binge watching all of the talking heads discussing whether or not Donald J. Trump is mentally fit to be the leader of the free world. Could he have dementia? Well, I don't know, but thank God no one's asking for my opinion. I thought watching TV was a passive activity, but apparently not anymore. Speaking of TV, I watched the Golden Globe Awards last night, and I want to give a shout out to Oprah Winfrey for her great speech on women's rights. I'm glad that she spoke directly to girls and to women who are working as farm workers or factory workers, not just to actresses. I, too, am a Me Too person. When it happened to me, I was a teenager, once when I was 17, and twice when I was 18. 3 different men. I felt at the time that I couldn't speak out because I thought others wouldn't believe me, or would judge me, or couldn't help me to get the justice that I now know I deserve. So thank you for speaking to all of us, Oprah. That's all I have for you today. Be well, and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.